I would like to invite Mr. Kocher, Chairman and founder of Scotch, for his opening remarks. You are perhaps muted. We are not able to hear you, Mr. Kocher.
Namaskar. Can public policy be done without the voice of the public, without taking public into account? So, this post 1991 journey of Indian reform is also the journey of India maturing more as a participatory democracy. I still remember when we were young, there was this whole idea about the Mai Baap Sarkar. People were supposed to go and plead in front of the officers and in front of the government. And the Mai Baap idea basically meant that, you are the government, you know better than us. So let the government decide what is good for us. So that is why you had a control and command economy. You had these very unwieldy plans. You had so much of focus on public sector. And essentially, you ended up creating a very underproductive and crisis-ridden kind of economy, which led way to a completely unsustainable situation in 1991, and where we had to actually unleash a series of reforms and join the rest of the world in terms of being a more open and a more participatory democracy. So while the reforms have unfolded in the area of economy, also very remarkably in the area of digitalization, there is an area which has not been able to keep pace, and that is the area of governance itself. The governance process and procedure reforms have been somewhat slower in coming compared to the other set of reforms. And part of that is because, I've always joked that India is poor by policy design. The kind of money that we have spent over the years, the kind of effort and resources that have been allocated to development and betterment of the poor is absolutely fantastic. However, historically, we've had a fairly leaky delivery system, and we've also had this hobby horse culture where whoever is on the chair decides what is the best for the people. So I think one remarkable journey that started a little later in the reform process was when the Ministry of Panchayati Raj was formed. More and more participatory planning was coming in, and grassroots level input was being given to policy. So one of the things that Scotch has done since inception is traveled across the country, talked to a lot of people, and tried to bring in that policy need, the felt need of the people, to the policy table, such that this policy serves the poor of India who need these interventions the most, the best. Also, while India is one of the most representative democracies, in the sense that we have almost 6 lakh elected representatives in the country, if you also count the Gram Panchayats, it has not been very vocal representation, in the sense that even in the parliament, historically, we find that the parliamentary system, the parliamentary democracy, was more driven by the ministries rather than the parliamentarians themselves. Their own involvement in decision making was rather low. There is a refreshing change that we find over the past 8 to 10 years, where the parliamentarians have become very active. So as I said, that we are a participatory democracy, but then how do you go about consulting 1.3 billion people? The best way is the democratic election that we have every 5 years. And so we select our representatives and we expect them to represent us. I think it's only recently that these representatives have started taking the job very seriously and become active. So we are no longer a pushover republic. We are also not a pushover parliament. If you look at the rapid changes that are around us, have thrown a lot of newer challenges in terms of policy challenges. The biggest challenge that the world is facing today is that of social media, e-commerce impacting our democracy and our economy. If you look at whether it's the US, whether it's other countries, the kind of incredible impact that social media today is having, and the kind of thought control that they can exercise, and the kind of selective wins that they can do is absolutely incredible, so much so that they can even undermine democracies. Data is the new oil, so they say. Data economy, value-added services on top of data is going to determine the new winners and losers. When you talk about artificial intelligence, where is the most teaching for the AI systems coming? And therefore, what are these AI systems more attuned to do is going to a lot depend on how social media behaves and shapes up our culture and our system. So, are we going to be yet another clone of the Western culture? Are we going to be hostage to some ideologies that are very rich, or they can be very well funded? I think the answer is no. And one person who's made that difference and made that difference enormously is Mrs. Meenakshi Lekhi, our member of parliament. She was the first person after 2014 when she was the first chief guest in Scotch Summit. And that is the time we knew that, she is a lady that we need to watch. And she's done an incredible job. Most of these multinationals think they're bigger than the governments. Uh, you know, well, they just don't feel that they're bigger than the governments. They sometimes act so. And then, of course, there was the erstwhile Bombay Club, etc. So people with the capitalist power or the money had somehow presumed themselves to be bigger than the governments or the government's representatives. And I think that is one thing that she has definitively changed during her term in the parliament. She has been very vocal and vociferous about issues that are very important to us, specifically in her role as the head of the parliamentary committee on the data protection bill. She has been able to get the high and the mighty to testify, and in the presence of the majesty of people of India, which is the Indian Parliament, and it's an incredible job. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome on our stage Mrs. Meenakshi Lekhi. For that reason and for many more, we have this Parliamentarian Year of the Year award. Last year it was Mr. BJ Panda, and I'm very happy to note that this year our collegium has selected Mrs. Meenakshi Lekhi for the incredible work that she has done as the recipient of Scotch Challenger Award for Member of Parliament of the Year. May I request Gursharan to read a citation, and if you could also have Mrs. Lekhi on the screen, and maybe we could give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Before I go on to make the formal announcement and read the citation, my team is going to put everyone on mute as well as switch off their videos so that the recipient of the award can be highlighted. So team, please go ahead and put everybody on video as well as the audio mute. And here we go. As I announced, the Parliamentarian of the Year 2021, the second term elected parliamentarian, distinguished Supreme Court lawyer, socio-political activist, and most recently chairperson, Joint Parliamentary Committee on Personal Data Protection Bill 2019, Meenakshi Lekhi is a woman on the move, being an active and committed participant in the parliamentary process. She's been entrusted with various responsibilities, including ideating on a legislation that has the potential to protect the privacy and personal dignity of India's citizens. There's another side of her. She has been actively involved in women empowerment and took up several cases, including of the permanent commissioning of women in the Indian Armed Forces with the Supreme Court. This paved the way for women officers to hold command posts. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together as we celebrate the Parliamentarian of the Year. So with this, I have the pleasure of inviting Mrs. Meenakshi Lekhi for the Jai Hind keynote. Please unmute yourself. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Gulsharan ji, Samir, Mr. Rohan, and everyone else who has joined in today to cause online. I mean, we would have loved to meet each other, but this aberration is because when there are unnatural circumstances, the unnatural methodology needs to be adopted, and that is the normal. And happy that the new normal, where we all have adopted new ways of staying connected, being known to each other in a different way, and communicating whatever we think about various subjects. So let me first begin by saying that a lot of apprehensions being expressed by not many corners, especially from outside the country. So far as our potential as a country is concerned, I think I could just think about what would have been the condition in 1947. I mean, I'm not comparing the freedom movement, but as a new nation, as a country which dedicated itself to democracy, principles of democracy and republic, and building a republic, so many naysayers, and it's a matter of history and record, expressed doubts, suspicion, whether this country is going to survive, not survive, survive on what terms, will not survive, and can we have an independent existence, especially from commentators from West, were very, very apprehensive that this country probably will not be able to see the next decade. And with all the might of our ancestors and people who love this country, who fought for the freedom, we proved all those naysayers wrong. And I am sure when I compare all this, I think we as a country are destined to do very, very big things. And we are the flag bearers of democracy. It's a different matter that Confucius centers run all across Europe and America. And those Confucius centers portray that the centrum of civilization has been China. Unfortunately, as with many scholarly studies, the kind of funding, finance, and I'm very sorry. We never had problem with electricity. All of us problem is started. So I was trying to communicate is that the concepts of democracy and republic are so enshrined in our existence, in our the manner of which actually surpasses the age which they give to democracy, which is about 480, Rome and Greece, Greco-Roman civilization. But Rigved talks about Mahajanpads and Janpads and Gram Sabhas and Gram Panchayats. Much the time of Mahatma Buddha, we had about 716 Mahajanpads with their respective council and treaty governance system. And I was just browsing something on YouTube, and I was so surprised that people are trying to say that people who in nation were probably alien, and we have that as Indians claim our heritage. We so democracy, in terms of even a written record, did not come with Magna Carta alone, and it's not the 12th century which gives us those concepts. So I think recently Baseshwara's centenary and a public parliament system, which was called Anubhav Mantapa, was started, and in Bidar district. So PM Modi, in one of his talks, talked about it in the year 2015 while unveiling the statue of Baseshwara on the banks of Thames River. So basically, time has come that whether it's social reformers, philosophers, science and technology, India has to not just lay foundation for the future, but also speak to the world, communicate to the world that what we stand for. And before others start usurping our credit, and somehow we've lost the area of narration. And I think building that area of narration, each one who's part of this summit, each one of us who holds responsibility towards India and being Bharatiya, living by the ideals of what is enshrined in our culture and thought, we need to take it forward and connecting it to the Data Protection Act, that how data is important. I can say that for this, we need to understand what kills democracies and where do democracies and how do democracies fail. So I think the first thing where democracies fail is when the communication starts to get being manipulated. And when communication gets to be manipulated, democracy is no longer relevant. And that's what we are seeing all around. So one can be shadow banned without one knowing about it. Your thought and data can be shared with someone else without you knowing about it. There could be algorithms which are collecting the kind of data which probably you never consented for. So deception in communication, deception in data management, deception in manner of working is going to cause damage to democracy, and it will be basically challenging the supremacy of parliament, supremacy of power, free, fair elections, and thus we need to have some method of controlling this kind of anarchical situation. And again, so far as Indian thought process is concerned, I think democracy ticks us all above anything else. And not to forget that we started with universal franchise at a time when women till 1972 and all were not even allowed to vote in countries like Switzerland and many other Western countries. And they claim to be democratic setups. So I think we as custodians of the will of the people and a place where we all get together, it's like a Mahapanchayat, had the responsibility of coming up with a bill which represents our ethos, our values, and protects us as a country, because there are kind of stealth wars which are going on, and a whole lot of people are not even aware of what kind of warring systems exist. So there had to be a meticulous study and a resolve through discussion and consensus, that everybody was given a free hand to speak, to address, to come up with their concerns, and everybody else who had a different point of view also could be considered. So if I go to the parliamentary procedure which was adopted, so what we did was that when this came to me in 2019, this bill was sent to me. But before that, 2017 onwards, process of consultation, process of speaking to various stakeholders, and plenty of discussion and drafts had already gone in. So I'm very, very grateful to all my predecessors who put in, not my predecessors as in joint parliamentary committee, because this is the joint parliamentary committee, but my predecessors as in people who thought and worked on the bill, and people who thought and worked on the bill, whether it was Justice Sri Krishna, whether it's people from NESCOM, whether it's people who work with the various ministries, etc. I'm grateful to all of them, because once you have a foundation, you can always build the edifice, and based on that, it gave an idea and a counter idea, and invokes different kind of thinking process, and then you're able to smoothen the edges far more, and it makes your job comparatively simpler as compared to the ones who have done the original thinking. And we of course have laws which are already existing in about 80 countries. GDPR to begin with was one of the initial ones, but we've seen PRISM Act, we've seen Cloud Act, we've seen Singapore model, we've seen so many other systems. So we had a fairly good idea of how the world is trying to deal with the new normal. And thus, with the coming of internet technology in 1990s to the present day, where you have swarm drones, it's a huge leap. And to deal with this huge leap, and to deal with this technology, or technological disruption is what people are calling it, the AI, IoT, cloud computing, dealing with data, actually, all these are methods of dealing with data. We've come a long way, and I would not call any law, I mean, being a lawyer myself, I would say there is no law which is perfect, and there is no law which is etched in rock. I always say law is etched in the sands of time. So with the wind, with the change in circumstances and situations, these contours of the sand will change, and there is nothing called perfect. And it's end of the day, it's law. It's not my baby who's going to be the most beautiful one for me all the time. It's so that kind of attachment to a law is an imperfect way of dealing with law. And as lawyers, I think we all understand that things have to change with time. The new technologies will come, new financial calculations will happen, new kind of tables will be put on the table, and thus the paradigm is going to change, and so the law will change also. And data is simply, the more you think, the data is not simply restricted to collection of statistics that we used to have at census time, a class register, absent, present, work management. No, it's not just restricted to that. Today, it has exponential rate of getting it collected, built, and consumed. And you need algorithmic setups to gain the minutest insight which one could never ever imagine before. It's like if I'm sitting on a chair, which particular limb I put more pressure on, how do I sit in a particular position, how is the body movement happening, can determine who I am. It's as minute as that. And it is in that context that we needed to deal with situations, and the data universe had to be brought together. And this was an urgent need and a legislative rigor which was sought to be created. And again, at a different level, the definition of data, definition of personal data, carving out of sensitive data, carving out of critical data, carving out of non-personal data, and all these to be determined by an agency where which has to deal with all the propositions at the same time, and a whole lot of pitfalls which were possibility. We've tried to plug in all that. Also deal with data economy, e-commerce, education, entertainment. So I would say there are various steps, and the key stakeholders, that one is the data principle, which is primary. A person who's creating data is the data principle. Then comes data custodian, the method through which the data is getting entry into, custodian, trustee, and businesses also. Then the businesses have a certain responsibility and they become data fiduciaries. So data principle, data fiduciary, and the entire system which has to work around these two systems, connecting and interconnecting, that was the simple job assigned to us. And I am sure that this ensemble, when it comes out, you will be all very pleased to see that how we have tried to put everything together and harness social, public, and economic value through data management, and in present times, to stay anonymous, not to stay anonymous, how one has to go forward. So I go back to my original thought that legislation is dynamic and hence changes with time, changes with technology, and managing digital footprints is going to be a challenge. But these are all laws etched in the sand and not the rock. And we are left with a Hobson's choice to stay put in the continuous state space. Hence, updation, amendments, course corrections have to be a continuous process to meet the unforeseen challenges. With these words, I want to thank everyone, Jai Hind, because I can't speak more than this about the intricacies of the law as it is made, because the report is yet to be submitted to the Parliament, to keep it very general. And I hope everyone will appreciate Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, Meenakshi ji. That was a pretty good and deep insight indeed, and we are all anxiously awaiting the PDP bill to become an act. Hopefully, it may be happening sooner than later. We look forward. I mean, we're hoping that it happens in this budget session itself. But that is going to, also throw a very big challenge on all of us, because privacy and data protection has been a fairly hazy notion in India. You travel in the train and you end up telling your co-passengers the story of your life. So coming from that kind of a cultural and anthropological backdrop, how is it that India will wake up to the digital age and the privacy age and implement all these things? It's going to be difficult enough for the government, it's going to be difficult enough for the corporations, and God help the smaller MSMEs or individuals who also have to comply to all this, but comply we must. So therefore, how do you, this big vision that Meenakshi ji has laid out in front of us of personal data protection, and why is it important to protect our democracy and our basic rights? We have formulated a committee in the CEOs Association for Inclusive India, which is, looking at implementation areas, and we would love to come and discuss some more with you at an appropriate time, Meenakshi ji, that how this can be implemented using technology, and very fast the Data Protection Act can become a reality. We have the person who's driving this in CEOs Association of Inclusive India is also a technologist, Mr. Rajarshi Prakastya, who's from Tata Communications Limited. Raj, could you throw some light on the vision that Meenakshi ji is given? How can industry translate that into reality?
Thanks, Samir. Meenakshi ji, it was an honor and pleasure listening to you. It's always good to listen to you, but today, you threw some light to various contours of history to now, and how lawmakers look at things differently. Specifically if you look at privacy, for an example, right? As Samir said, privacy is something that is everybody's right, but then managing privacy, specifically because we don't know what is private to us in most of the times, or we give away our privacy data because we are plain simple lazy, right? Many a times I don't read the huge long document which comes with Facebook or Google when I do a new app, and that's laziness from my side, right? And I'm sure that's true for a lot of people. So in that scenario, how do you look at privacy and protect somebody's privacy at the end of the day is what you're doing, right? And that's a stupendous job, because at the end of the day, as you said, there are forces at play which are strong, and you will have to look at all those things. But with this also comes a specific, different angle, right? Specifically for India, when we look at a framework which needs to look at 1.3 billion people, majority of which is not digitally literate, the problem is amplified exponentially, right? And when we look at what Samir was talking about in terms of how a large organization is going to meet a privacy setup, or a small organization, or even Scotch, for example, going forward, how are you going to manage data, meeting the guidelines, meeting the guardrails that Madam Lekhi, you've put for everybody to follow the direction that you've put into your bill? That's not going to be easy for everyone, right? And here is where we believe that we need to build a blueprint. As an industry body coming together, we should build a blueprint looking at the PDP bill on how to meet the regulation with a technology framework, right? And this should actually start right from the data capture to classification, going to all the way to the retrieval process, right? Now, if you want to do this, while many large organizations may be able to do it themselves, but then, I was talking to Samir, and Samir was saying that, hey, for small organizations, will it be interesting to have a framework which says privacy as a service? Can an MSME, for example, take privacy as a service, because otherwise they'll struggle. They can't hire a lawyer, and lawyers are costly. I'm sure that you know. So what do you do in a situation like this? And the point is that it's not about one time. It's about managing the life cycle. And that life cycle, even if you're an MSME, may mean that you have thousands of data. So, for example, right now, if I see in this webinar itself, there are more than 600 people. So, which means Scotch has, from this webinar itself, more than 6,000 people's data. And this can be amplified because Samir has been in this for a long time, which means that he has tens and thousands of data. Tomorrow your bill will ask him that, Samir, what are you doing about them? So the point is, what's the technology stack, right? What's the rules of engagement? Since this is extremely critical, how do you ensure that this is disaster ready? How do you ensure that this is foolproof? All these things put together, we believe that if you can think about privacy operations center as a concept, right, which will review the entire bill and also connect it back to the enterprise architecture for that specific enterprise to ensure that the relationship between the venues of PII data generation and the different entities, including the subjects, because here, obviously it's very complex in terms of who is the subject, who are the organizations who are taking the data, and those organizations can be government, authorities, private organizations, hospitals, individuals, etc. How the whole relationship is working, and how the framework will bring in the controls in terms of people, process, technology, and the life cycle management, right? So at the end of the day, we really believe that while you are trying to do something which is extremely important, and that's a right of the people of India. To meet that basic right, obviously every company has to do its part. While doing that, they need some help, and that's where a privacy operations center or privacy as a service will come in. And we, as an industry body, I believe it's extremely important that we kind of make a blueprint, make it easier for everybody to take it forward in a manner which is better for, as you said, right? It's something that will take India to the next level. And as a citizen, as an individual, it's my duty to look at things like that. So back to you, Samir. I hope that was useful.
Thank you so much. And if you set that up, you got your first customer in Scotch, because I'd be damned who consented for what, which conference, which newsletter, which email. And, if it's going to complicate my life this much, then, I really, really need help and support on that. And I cherish the democracy that we have, but I also like the money that I make off this data. So I have to do, fine balancing act within that. And, Meenakshi ji and me are, she may be a little younger than me, but I think about her children should be around the same age bracket. So, my children are now of age. Rohan is now 20, almost 27, 28 years old. And he asks a lot of difficult questions, and sometimes difficult to answer even for me. So we started this whole thing called Chat with Rohan, which is aspiration meets experience, where aspiring youth can ask from the experienced leaders. And we are delighted to bring you the second episode of it. The first episode was last year, which he did with Mr. Amitabh Kant. And I invite Rohan to chat up Meenakshi ji and ask some questions that normally only the youth would ask.
I believe we're just waiting for the pin. If the host could kindly pin us to the screen.
Done.
Thank you. Madam, a very warm welcome to episode 2 of Chat with Rohan, where experience meets aspiration. It's truly an honor and a privilege to have you with us here today. Madam, not many people may know this about you, and the only way that I found out was because I did some considerable digging myself. It would be a great misfortune to not share this with the nation's youth. You have not had the easiest childhood. Would you like to tell us a little about your formative years in school?
No, 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 no. I don't discuss those things.
I
I
understand, madam.
I enjoy myself, and that's it. I'm very happy with my life. Challenges come and go, and that's what makes you who you are. And I don't think that's a selling point in my life.
Absolutely, madam. In fact, I believe your belief in scientific temper can perhaps be traced to your interest in medicine, biology, and Sanskrit. As a student at Hindu, you took an interest in debating at Delhi University. You went on to study and practice law. Would you like to tell us about your motivations behind becoming a truly public spirited intellectual?
Uh, Motivation, I think, comes from your roots, and roots are what your parents and the principal's parents ingrain in you. So it's like your AI systems built when you are still a baby, and constant feeding of the data keeps getting into and making you still better and better. And that's how all the engineering happens. So the engineering requirement is, of course, there's a physical frame, but more than the physical frame, it's the software which gets put inside you. And the software comes in the form of, as we call it, your basic belief system, which at a very young age your parents put inside you. So I feel that is what the that's how machines operate. That's how humans operate. So my motivation comes from all that I saw during my growing up years. All that was fed into me by my parents, teachers, and anyone who I came in touch with. And all those experiences made me who I am and what belief I have.
Madam, you've always believed in realizing India's unutilized potential. Do you believe that India hasn't taken advantage of the huge data market that it is thus far?
No, I think we are not just a data market. We are a very, very developed civilization. So the principles by which we have lived, the kind of intellectual capacity this country has to offer, we have been colonized. And I firmly believe that with all our ability, with all our capacity, our true potential has not really come out. And Mr. Purkais, who's from the industry, so many other people who I can see on the panel. I would say that when you look around, to look at all these people, I mean, they are world leaders in their respective field. Look at you. You could beat anyone, anywhere, in any part of the world. Your dad, Samir, could compete with anyone in that field, with anyone, anywhere across the globe. So when it comes to intellectual capacity of Indians, it cannot be challenged. And the reason is that traditionally we've always respected knowledge, and we've traditionally respected, education has been, we may have been illiterate for a long period of time around our independence for various exploitative reasons. But we as people have respected knowledge, and we carry a chip on our shoulders when it comes to knowledge. And thus, when you look around, you see that we have huge potential amongst our youth, needs to be harnessed further. A lot of things have happened in past 5 years, 7 years, ever since 2014. A kind of a push is being given to digitization, to connecting, fair governance, etc. We've tried to work very hard, but I still feel a lot needs to be done. A lot can be done. And when you look around the systems, you see that we are dealing with an unfair system. Unfair not just in India, but globally. So there is a lot of IP theft which is going on right now, stealthily, which people don't even know, where people may have spent 50 years, 100 years perfecting a particular technology. There are countries and there are civilizations who just steal it away, thieve it away, and they are gone. And they may be the largest manufacturer in the world for all you know. A lot of counterfeiting goes on. Our engineers, I mean, say from Sundar Pichai to Nadella to everyone else, our centers in Bangalore and everywhere else, Hyderabad, you can say to some extent now Delhi also. These are the centers which have the best brains working on computer sciences. And we have, I think, top 40-50% of engineering students are taking up computer science. When you see this scenario, you feel that we have nothing to lose. We have a lot of science floating around. But the flip side, which I want to bring industry in, the flip side is we become body shops, basically. We are doing the menial work and we have become the data colonies because our data is going to people which is not being harnessed by Indians. It on the face of it, it looks Sundar Pichai. On the face of it, it may look Nadella. But on the back of it, if you see the backend meeting or integration, then you see a different kind of board is what controls these guys also. A different kind of business model which is controlling these people. And it's not beneficial to India and Indians. We need to get on the hardware side of the business. So software we've done very well, but I think in hardware, in technology, in manufacture, no data can be transferred unless there is a hardware which is transmitting it. And there we are missing out. Whether it's cameras, it's cell phones, it's computers, 70% of the world computers produced by one country, and all kind of stealth technologies getting used. And that goes for everything else. I mean, but during Corona, we have also shown that while we are very good with our software manufacture and we are very, very good with putting the right codes, but we can also come up with hardware. I mean, we could be self-sufficient in PPE kits. We could produce so many other things. Pharma industry, we've shown that corona vaccine can be independently made in India. So on many things, we have huge potential. And I think that's where a lot of work needs to be done. And I was listening very carefully and consciously to what Mr. Purkayastha has to say. And I genuinely feel, and I want to assure everyone in the industry, statutorily, we've put in some mechanism where industry consultation is mandatory. There will be industry consultation on the working of the bill. I want to bring industry on board if I could cajole them, if I could request them, that please start getting into hardware. Please start getting into microchips. Please start building phones. Please start building computers, because no matter how successful you get in your software, and the money may come from software, but it's the hardware which is controlling the software.
Madam, speaking about the bill, your committee is being seen as the last bastion protecting the data security and digital sovereignty of India and its citizens. You've proposed 89 amendments across 51 clauses over 66 sittings to the PDP Bill 2019. What many people may not know that it is in fact a very citizen-friendly bill with a minimal role of state intervention. What has been your committee's principles and motivations behind these recommendations? The driving force behind these recommendations, madam?
So principle has been, as I said, when the Constitution was written of the people, right? That was the motivation. So when we are writing, the motivation has to be balancing of various interests. And balancing of interests could mean privacy, and privacy is at times running counter parallel to public good, or is running counter parallel to other principles of governance, pandemic. So we have tried to carve out those things, and we have tried to accommodate various points of views, giving benefit to everyone. End of the day, it's my country and my country's governance, my people. We all owe it to ourselves, to our coming generations, to our ancestors, that we do a good job. And that's what has been the motivation.
Madam, you have walked the talk and ensured that several foreign and Indian companies deposed before your committee. The actions of some of these companies might reflect their belief that MNCs are bigger than sovereign countries and parliaments. Should e-commerce companies be allowed to freely leverage data to conduct extensive digital profiling for market dominance? What are the benefits that are likely to accrue to Indian businesses from the data localization requirements?
So an important observation. An important observation was that most of the Indian companies have localized their data, and they already are localizing the data. Most of the foreign companies who are having the business of dealing with our data have not localized, and they do not want to localize. They've been challenging that authority that we shall not, or do not do this or do not do that. Otherwise, we will leave trolls behind you. That's kind of not in so many ways, but in so many other ways. That's the kind of messaging. But then it is sovereign function of the parliament, and sovereign is who we as parliamentarians were representing. And the sovereign of this country believes otherwise, and whatever we believe, nations of interstate principles which need to deal with it. And when I use the word interstate principles, I mean GDPR exists, and GDPR, these are the companies which are working close across jurisdictions. So when you're working across jurisdictions, you know how you're framing policy working around GDPR. Now you can't say and turn around and say what I do with GDPR, I refuse to do it in India. These are, these gimmicks, these are gimmicks basically, but there will be some kind of told to activate themselves in a certain way, but then it's the might of the people of this country which matters.
Madam, you spoke extensively today about what kills democracy. You spoke about the manipulation of communication, deception, and stealth wars. Given the potential of certain platforms to subvert democratic ideals through targeted digital advertising, do you think it's time to let social media companies stop hiding behind the veil of free harbor? Should social media perhaps be regulated along the lines of conventional media?
You have to wait. The report, the day report gets accepted, you will see what
A fair answer, good madam. Well, let me ask you another question then. In light of the recent privacy policy push by WhatsApp, which has now been challenged in the Delhi High Court, do you think that some social media companies are disrespecting the privacy of Indian users? Are they of the view that they can use this time to make hay while the sun shines through an ex-ante white card before the bill is passed?
So I would put it differently. I would not go onto the names of the law as exists, deals with it, and we have definitely dealt with many of these concerns. And again, you have to wait to get the right answers.
Absolutely, madam.
I would say.
On a parting note, I do have one final question, madam, and thank you so very much for your time. The current generation of Indians are digital natives, and there are many of us who would like to see you in the IT ministry one day. Do you have any advice for the responsible use of technology by young users? What is your advice to young India?
So I would say Mr. Purkais said that there is a consent fatigue. When you read a 67-page of a contract, phone or setting it up, etc., etc. And then it says the jurisdiction will be based out of California. And every equipment that any of us buys in the market says designed in California, manufactured in China. I think the youth of this country, especially the ones who are into computer sciences and understand data management and statistical analysis, etc., better, need to educate everybody else. Youth needs to reach out to people and thinking power behind the campaigns which go on. Earlier with media, I used to say that. I say it's not what gets printed is relevant. I used to read 11 newspapers only to come to the conclusion what must be the truth. Because between the lines you read, end of the day, this is what is being shown, but what is behind this? We know, and at least all of us, I have personally experimented this. That I would say something which a person my age probably will never do or cannot do. I would say that, I want to buy red shoes. You know it, I'll never wear red shoes. In my life, I won't wear red shoes or would never be seen wearing red shoes. But I'll purposely say those things and say, wearing a black dress with red shoes and a red clutch will look very nice, etc., etc. And suddenly within 2 hours, I'm flooded with red shoes ads here, there, wherever, and everywhere. So it's very clear that I am being eavesdropped and I'm being listened into. Now, I do not think either wearing red shoes or being heard speaking those lines is an act of criminality, but definitely without my permission, listening in is a definite criminality. It is definitely, I can say this, I can stand on the city square and announce I want to wear red shoes. As Samir was saying that we are in the habit of chatting and giving our life history on a train travel. We all love to, we are very open people, but is as long as I want to tell this. Now I wear red, white, black. It's nobody's business to know and listen into the conversation I'm having in the privacy of my office or in my room at home. And that is where one needs to understand technology. And that is where what happens with the technology is again something which all of you should carry that message, that how artificial intelligence gets built, the data is Indian, it's taken out of India. AIs are built, sold to us, built by Indians, and the IP is getting out of India. That's the, funniest things. It's not as if this is getting developed by others. It's getting developed in India by Indians, but stored in a third country, IP going to a fourth country. So I think we all as country need to be a bit more centered around our interests as a country. And sometimes even if we have to give up a little bit of, say, extra money in purchasing an equipment, a little bit of extra money in, or a little bit of extra freedom that we've learned to so much enjoy, or convenience, so be it. Every country had to pass through those phases to reach the developmental level all of them have reached. We should also do that. You have to go through the rough and tough of life. And I just pray that I have a lot of hopes and a lot of expectations from my younger generation, like our seniors had from us. We have the same aspirational India. We have the same aspirations and expectations from everyone around us. And we tend to, the elders and seniors tend to pass on their responsibility to the next generation, which I would gladly pass on to my next generation, because I am very, very sure this is the brightest of the world exists in Indians, and they are the most knowledgeable and most cultured, hardworking people. And let's carry that flag forward.
Thank you very much for that inspirational note on Young India, madam. Namaskar and Jai Hind.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rohan, for that very interesting chat, and thank you, Meenakshi ji. You so aptly described the process of colonization that's kind of going on currently, how our own stuff is being sold back to us. The Britishers did quite the same. Fortunately, they were, they all had white faces. So we know that, they were not Indians, they were foreigners. Unfortunately, most of our colonizers today come wearing Indian faces. So it's very difficult to differentiate. And while the poll is going on, I would like to pose one question that we've got from Professor NVC Menon. Professor Menon was a Minister of State rank member of NDMA during the previous government, which is the UPA government. I can actually have Professor Menon ask the question live. Would you like to ask the question live? You can unmute yourself and ask. You're allowed. Professor Menon? Okay, anyway, so his question was, good morning, how does the government of India respond to the concerns of social media platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook, and even Zoom, allegedly compromising the privacy of citizens who have been utilizing these services?
You want me to answer?
Yes, that's a question to you, madam.
Okay, so I think we need to, as of now, we have platforms, and under the IT Act, these things are being handled. And so far as data protection is concerned, data protection has not the entire platform system, because that would require a different kind of study and management. But in terms of privacy, the Act will deal with it.
All right, thank you.